Hey, welcome back to the Torque Force YouTube channel. It's me, David Torque. So it's been a couple months since the last video, and I've been hard at work on my New Year's resolution to play through one Pokemon game from each generation this year. While playing these games, I recently had an epiphany. Pokemon is all about evolution. And I don't mean Charmander evolving into Charmeleon evolving into Charizard. I mean that literally. Pokemon has been around for a long time, and much like how we all grow, change, and develop, so does Pokemon. Whether you began playing when the series first started, or if you picked it up sometime along the way, I'm sure you've observed how the series has changed over time. For better or for worse, Pokemon has been evolving. Many fans like me are resistant to change, and we thrive off the nostalgic feelings that accompany playing the games that we played when we were young. While those nostalgic feelings are great, I've realized that they can fuel the fire of criticism. After a long hiatus from the series, I remember my first impressions playing Pokemon Sword back in 2020. I hated it. The most recent generation I had played prior to that was Generation 5, and Sword just felt like a complete separation from the series that I knew and loved. It looked different, felt different, played different. It didn't give me any of the nostalgic feelings that I expected. After Sword, I went and played Generation 6's Pokemon Y, and I felt the same way about it. At that point, I had all but determined that the newer games had just fallen off, and that any future releases simply wouldn't measure up. And that feeling was validated by the botched release of Generation 9's Scarlet and Violet. My opinions of the newer Pokemon games were at an all-time low. That is, until now. Like I mentioned, I had an epiphany. And that epiphany reshaped how I view Pokemon. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this video, how the Pokemon series has evolved and how we have to evolve with it. And real quick, before we do, I'd like to direct your attention to the subscribe button. The Torque Force managed to hit our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and we set a new goal to hit 2,000. So if you're watching this video and haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that button and subscribed. It's free and it really helps our channel. Thanks a ton for your all's support. Okay, shameless plug over, back to the video. So like I mentioned, many Pokemon fans like myself are resistant to change, and we tend to chase the dragon that is the nostalgia we associate with those older Pokemon games. Whenever new games come out, there's always a bit of the fanbase that winds up disappointed. That's because we tend to compare every new game to the golden era of Pokemon. This golden era is really pretty subjective because Pokemon hit its peak for all of us at different times. Typically though, you'll tend to see people comparing the newer generations with generations 1 through 4, with Gen 5 sometimes being thrown in the mix depending on who you ask. Games like Emerald, Platinum, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Black 2, and White 2 get put on a pedestal, and rightfully so. They're great games. For fans who have enjoyed the series for a long time like me, it's natural to compare the more recent games to this golden era. Oftentimes we do so with the best intentions. We really want the newer games to be as enjoyable and as iconic as those from the golden era. Unfortunately, when the Pokemon Company fails to meet those lofty expectations, it tends to incite a large portion of the fan base to voice their opinions. And sometimes those opinions are best left unshared. Unfortunately, there's been a history of harassment directed towards those involved with developing these games, as well as the fans who actually enjoy the newer games. Harassing someone because you weren't happy with the game? Come on, man. It's totally fine to expect more from these games, but there are levels to this, and harassment will never be okay. All of that aside though, when it comes to the newer generations, there's a bit of a mob mentality shared between a large portion of the golden era fanbase. Because of that, satisfying this portion of the fanbase becomes increasingly difficult. There really are a lot of valid complaints about the newer generations, but I think it really boils down to resistance to change. Pokemon had really dialed things in by the end of Generation 5, and as they moved away from pixels and sprites to 3D models, the mob of critical fans slowly grew with each subsequent generation. Like I mentioned, I found myself in that category of the fanbase. I was extremely critical of the newer generations. That is, until this year. Until I started my New Year's resolution. Like I mentioned, I've been on my own Pokemon journey, trying to play one game from each generation over the course of the year. I'm not doing it in order though, and I strategically ordered the generations in a way that I thought would keep me motivated to push through and achieve my goal. What I didn't realize though was that it would also completely change my perspective on the newer games in the series. So I started out with Pokemon Emerald, and obviously it was great. I played the game with a unique team too, taking advantage of my GameCube and Pokemon Coliseum to create a bit of a super team. I thought it'd be fun to play through the game with a preset team of Pokemon that I haven't really used before because they're either locked in the late game, post game, or just extremely difficult to catch. I set out into the Hoenn region with Torchic, Bagon, Beldum, Feebas, and 2 Eevee, who I eventually evolved into Umbreon and Espeon. It was super fun playing through the game with this team, and I know my younger self would have been envious to see such a legendary team. Little did I know though, the team I'd planned to use for this whole game would actually change quite a bit. While grinding levels one night, I had a fateful encounter with a Magnemite whose poles were gray instead of the normal red and blue. I had found a shiny Magnemite. It was only the second shiny Pokemon I had ever caught, and naturally I decided that I had to add him to my team. Switching him out for Espeon was an easy decision, and with Espeon out of the team, I ended up switching up Umbreon for a Skarmory too. At that point, I was feeling a bit like Steven Stone since my team was half Steel type. Now, obviously Pokemon Emerald was great, and with such a cool team, I blazed through the game super quickly. After a little Battle Frontier action, I decided it was time to move on to the next game, and next up on the list was Generation 8's Pokemon Shield. Now, this is when it happened. This is when I had my epiphany. Like I mentioned, when I played Pokemon Sword back in the day, it left a really bad taste in my mouth, and left me really disappointed with the state of the newer Pokemon games. When playing Pokemon, I tend to gravitate towards Pokemon I'm familiar with, so this time around, I decided to only use Pokemon introduced in Generation 8. That way I could become more familiar with Galar and everything new to that region. And with that in mind, I jumped into the game. This time around though, I wasn't chasing the nostalgia dragon. I knew Shield would be a totally different experience from the older games, so I went in with a different perspective. I focused on exploring towns, talking to NPCs, customizing my character, and encountering as many unfamiliar Pokemon as I could. Now, I won't lie, the start of the game was a bit slow, but it introduced a whole lot all at once. I met new characters like Hop, Leon, and Tanya, got my first glimpse of the wild area, and was introduced to the revamped Gym Challenge. After that, I was released into the Galar region, and that's when the real journey began. I set off on the Gym Challenge, encountered unfamiliar Pokemon, and explored every nook and cranny that I could. I wasn't in any rush to beat the game, I just wanted to explore. And the more I explored, the more immersed I became. I didn't realize it at first, but there were so many things I missed when I played Sword originally, like the trainer cards. Whenever you encounter an important character like a rival or a gym leader, they'll give you their trainer card. Each trainer card has a description on the back, and these descriptions add a ton of depth and make every interaction with that trainer so much more meaningful from that point forward. Now, that's just one example of something that I missed when I originally played Gen 8. There were a lot more things that I missed though, and as I explored, the more little details that I found and the more immersed I became. Rather than nitpick everything that was different from the newer games, I actually began to appreciate the differences and enjoy the discovery that came along with those new experiences. Inadvertently, I was playing the games just like I did when I was a kid, and that's when it happened. That's when I had my epiphany. The Pokemon series has evolved so much over all these years, and it's changed significantly. In the same way though, so have I. Over the years, I've developed and matured as a person. I've grown physically, mentally, and spiritually. I don't approach life the same way that I did when I was a kid. Likewise, I haven't been playing Pokemon the same way either. I've been holding on to this idea of Pokemon as it was in my childhood, trying to replicate those same feelings, but life doesn't work that way, right? We don't stay the same, and neither should Pokemon. The franchise has had to evolve, adapt, and explore new territory just like the players. It's no longer just about reliving those childhood moments. It's about embracing what's new and what's different. And honestly, once I let go of the need for things to stay the same, I started to really appreciate the newer games. And I think that's what makes Pokemon so magical. It's evolved with its fan base. As new generations of fans are introduced to the series, Pokemon has introduced new ideas, concepts, and experiences. And despite all those new ideas, concepts, and experiences, they've still maintained the core of the series that long-term fans like us enjoy so much. They still offer that sense of discovery, joy, and connection that we all fell in love with in the first place. Maybe we'll never fully have those nostalgic feelings from back in the days of Gens 1 through 5, but we can still enjoy the experience for what it is now. I've mentioned this in a couple videos now, but my wife and I recently went on an incredible trip to Japan. While we were there, we managed to visit several of the Pokemon centers scattered throughout the country. This was a few months back, and I hadn't quite had my epiphany about the series yet, but every time I walked into one of those Pokemon centers, it was like I was thrust into a living, breathing celebration of the franchise's evolution. Each store had everything from classic plushies of the original starters to brand new merchandise featuring the latest Pokemon. They're a perfect blend of nostalgia and modern innovation, existing side by side. Kids were running around wide-eyed at the latest Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet, while older fans were geeking out over the vintage merch and re-releases of older designs. I think my time exploring throughout Japan and visiting various Pokemon centers actually planted the seeds that led to my epiphany. Pokemon isn't just about holding on to the past or chasing nostalgia. It's about welcoming new generations of fans while still honoring the history that made it all possible. The franchise isn't stuck in time, and neither are we. And standing there in those Pokemon centers, surrounded by fans of all ages, I truly understood that Pokemon's evolution is what keeps it alive and thriving. As I've been hard at work on my New Year's resolution, I've made it all the way through Hoenn, Galar, and Sinnoh in Pokemon Emerald, Shield, and Diamond. I just recently started Generation 9's Pokemon Scarlet, and not even an hour into the game, Director Clavel said something so profound that perfectly mirrored my epiphany and thoughts I've shared in this video. Yet no matter how much the times may change, the wonder of meeting new Pokemon never does. That is truly a timeless pleasure. And the more Pokemon you encounter, the more you'll find yourself growing and changing. At the end of the day, Pokemon's evolution reflects our own journey of growth. And just like how we might not fully appreciate where we are in life until we look back, I think Pokemon fans will come to realize that changes to this series aren't something to fear, they're something to celebrate. And even if the new games don't perfectly capture the same magic as the older ones, they still manage to capture something new and exciting, something that reflects the Pokemon of today and the people we've become since we first picked up a Game Boy. So now I'm curious to know your thoughts. What do you think about my epiphany, and do you share similar opinions on the Pokemon series and how it's changed over the years? Are there any new elements to the series that you might have overlooked? Or do you just completely disagree with everything I said? Either way is fine. Let me know what you think in the comments below. With all that said, thanks so much for your support. I'll be continuing my journey through the generations, and I'm so excited to continue experiencing Pokemon's evolution over the years. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you liked it, or even considered subscribing to the Torque Force YouTube channel. We're hard at work on our goal to hit 2,000 subscribers, and it would mean a ton if you helped us get there. Regardless of that though, thanks so much for your support, and I hope to see you in the next video. Now, without further ado, thanks so much for watching, and goodbye.
Hear me scream, I'm here to break your streamer. Honkus, hear me scream, I'm here to break your streamer.